Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hola, everybody. Welcome to another live stream with Naomi Novik, and this time Mark Diaz Truman, head of Magpie Games. And let me double check audio is audioing. Um, Hopefully, audio is
Yes.
audio. Yay,
Yeah.
good. Always paranoid about that, no matter how many times you do this. But yes, we're here today for a live Q&A for the last, I believe, 9 days of the Kickstarter. And we're here with author extraordinaire Naomi Novik, she, her, and with one of our fellow designers and obviously head of Magpie Games, Mark Diaz Truman, he, him, and I am Diana Moon, she, her, Faye. I am usually a Magpie GM or moderator on the Discord and your question person for today. Um, Welcome, everybody. Sorry, one of those, I think I chugged my coffee too much. um, let's
Well,
go.
it's really exciting to be here. I mean, we're
Yeah.
super excited about how things have gone with the campaign.
Yeah.
Whenever we do a new project where we really don't know how people are going to react, and I think both the number of people and the excitement from it is just been really infectious, and we're super excited to have hit all these stretch goals and doing all these different things, and we're especially excited to have the two books to start, like the core book and then a book that goes into all kinds of other places in the world. So I'm excited to talk about that a little bit today. And Naomi, how are you feeling?
I'm so excited. I mean, I've been so thrilled the whole way through this project, and I'm so happy with, how things have been going. And yeah, and I can't wait to actually have it. So, and
Well,
that's my own. It's like, the Kickstarter's already, barely started. I'm like, where's my book? Where's my
right,
book?
exactly. Yeah. It's so funny because when we were working on like designing elements or like showing you samples of things, it's like everything feels like really cool, I guess. And then you put it in
Yeah.
front of people and all of a sudden it feels considerably more real, right?
Yeah.
Because they're excited about it. And then you realize these are mock-ups. We still have to like cut down trees and turn them into paper and then print things on them. It's a lot of work left to do.
Yeah. But still exciting to see it happening, and to start
Absolutely.
see it taking shape.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I know my mic is a little low. I'll be fixing that in a moment. But and this was answered in the first Q&A, but I know a lot of people weren't able to show up for the first Q&A. So just very briefly, Naomi, how did you come to getting or wanting a Temeraire RPG going along, and how did you meet Mark and Magpie?
So I mean, sorry, I'm here with my little old school play D&D when I was a kid. In fact, I sort of would corral my little sister and her friend and my friend and her little sister and force them to play D&D with me. So I just love tabletop gaming. And it's one of those things where I got the rights back to Temeraire. And I sort of thought before we go out, I would really love to see somebody other than me do something with this. I love the idea of a game, and something that, not least of which, because the way tabletop gaming works is it really invites you into the world. It really sort of invites you to kind of like dig your hands in and take it apart um, and kind of jump in a way that I feel is potentially really fun in Temeraire. I feel like there's such a global scope to it, and there's so many historical sources and inspiration that you can take. And I feel like that was sort of my inspiration. And I think I just sort of said to my agent, "Hey, can you find someone?
Yeah.
Would anybody be interested?" And she went out and came back with Magpie, and which I sort of feel like is appropriate, right? Magpies go out and like get shiny things and bring them
That's
home.
that's what we do.
So
That's what we do. I
yeah.
think you've nailed it. That like whenever we are approached by somebody or we approach someone about a license, the first question we have to ask is like, will this work as a world separate from the story of the characters in it? And what's really cool about Temeraire from the first moment that I read it is that Lawrence he's an incredible character. Temeraire is an even more incredible character to some degree, but like they're incredible people, but their world is way bigger than them. And that's really different from, say, a story where everything kind of revolves around that one person. Everything is about that one narrative. And that doesn't mean that those stories are also great, but it's really hard to make a role-playing game, when it's just one hero who's done all the things that ever matter, and then everybody else, right? So if you think about something like Pendragon, which is a very famous RPG from Chaosium that's been around now for, I think it's like 50, 40 years, something like that. Part of it is you don't play Arthur, you don't play King Arthur, but there's a lot of other knights. There's all these other knights who there's stories about and they go out and do stuff. And so King Arthur can be a figure in that story, but you don't have to play Arthur for it to matter. And then sort of the other side is there are games like Brendan and I, our first game we worked on together was actually the Firefly RPG, which is now everybody's talking about because of the announcement of the animated show. But in the Firefly RPG, you mostly played those 9 characters. And what was fun about it was like writing your own script with the characters
Hmm.
you love, right? So those two extremes work really well. It's really hard to do something in the middle, right? Like we
Yeah.
want either you to have your own characters with like wildly big world, or for you to be playing Marvel and playing Captain America and Spider-Man because those are the characters you love, right? And
Right.
so we Temeraire as a setting totally falls on that. Like it's a big world, it's a big war. There are lots of dragons, lots of people, infinite stories. And as you noted, Naomi, when we work on a new mission, we're like, what historical event lives at the center of this mission? What's going to make this an actual, like, historical fantasy thing
Hmm.
and not just there's some dragons and some soldiers, but like what makes it part of the actual historical narrative of Europe or the actual historic narrative of the Americas?
Right.
Keep
So
hitting
I
the wrong
think,
button. Sorry. OBS updated, and so now they have these new shiny buttons, and I'm like, that's the button I want to hit. No, it's not. Related to that, I know you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but people are very curious, like from game design perspective, how difficult was it to incorporate the dragons into the rule set? Um, and relatedly, why isn't there a focus, and I'm generalizing this from a couple of people asking, why isn't there a focus on wargaming in this, considering Temeraire, the series, is
yeah.
about the war?
Yeah, so I think David, when we were first talking, you told the story a little bit when you were talking with Brendan. But when we were first talking, you were like, "Well, see, clearly nobody can play dragons, so let's just move on." And we were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! No, the cool thing about this game is that you can play dragons." And I think I told you the story before, but Marissa and
Yeah.
I play a lot of role playing games together. I am mostly the GM; she is mostly the player. She can GM, but she just prefers to play. And when we go to play together, we actually have a little bit of a problem, which is we don't really want our relationship to be what the game is about, but most Magpie games are about relationships. So if we're playing Cartel and I'm El Narco and she's my spouse, well, guess what? That's that's gonna be
Right.
that's what the fiction's about, right? But so when we first started talking to you, I was like, oh my God, we can be married in the game. I can be the writer and she can be a dragon and we can be together forever because our
Right.
bond is so important, right? And there's just so many moments, especially I think in the first book when the bond is forming, where
Yeah.
Temeraire says things that like like I think the moment that just speaks to me so much is when he's like, I would give up all the gold in the world for you, Lawrence. I'm glad I don't have to, but I would if I had to, right? And it's like just the sweetest thing to say because it's coming from Temeraire's perspective, right? And for me as someone who wants to play games with my friends where sometimes we are like so rock solid together, or even we fight, but it's within this very deep bond. We knew from a
Right.
minute when we wanted the dragons to be playable characters.
Yeah.
And the fun of it is that the kinds of systems that we work on are systems where tactical changes are less important than narrative changes. So obviously if you get in a fight with a dragon you lose, right? If unless you have a real good plan to deal with a dragon, the dragon's going to breathe fire on you or bite you or just generally pick you up and drop you from 10,000 feet. But that's like not what these relationships are about. That's It's not like Lawrence and Temeraire fight, it's they discuss, right? And then in that case it's a matter of figuring out the scale of what are the dragons doing, what are the humans doing. I'm curious now that you like when you think about your original concerns. I think you were worried that like the dragons would all have to stand around outside while the humans did things that mattered.
Well, I actually feel like, I did sort of go in with this assumption, right, that you kind of had to choose one or the other, right? And I remember our first meeting where you sort of described how you would do both. And I was just like, that's brilliant. That's right. You know, the whole and I do think, right, you know, so the question, why not more wargaming? I feel like, for one thing, anyone who's interested in the pleasures of the tactics and the strategy can absolutely put as much of that in as they want to, right? But I do think that at the heart of Temeraire, it is about characters. It is about individual people in this setting. You know, and obviously, I love, in a
Yeah,
way, gaming out in my
yeah.
head how like a Napoleonic battle would have gone with dragons, right? But to me, that was always secondary to, and what does that mean for our characters, right?
I'm thinking
And,
about the time that he actually discovers Temeraire. The battle where they seize the ship and the egg is not actually in the story, right? What's in the story, what the most important part is the sailors, because Lawrence is a sailor to start. They're all
right,
standing around looking at the egg, like,
right,
well, what do we do now? Right. So it's like,
right,
if I'm running a game, I would probably jump us right to, okay, so you guys, the sort of setup of the premise is you've taken the ship. Good job. What, and then I might go around. What did it cost you? Who was killed during this fight, et cetera.
yeah,
And then I'd say, and here's what we're actually going to talk about today. There's a dragon egg here and it looks
right,
like it's going to hatch. And then the players and the other dragons, the dragons and the humans they're going to jump into action discussing what they think about this egg because that's where the fiction really lives.
yeah, yeah. And I do think that, um, you know, I do feel like there's no wrong way to make a great game, right? And I do feel like I really like, I don't know, I just really love the idea of a game that allows you to really delve into the dragon captain relationship among others, and all the relationships that sort of grow around it, right? The relationships within a formation, right? The first lieutenant who really wants a dragon of their own. The you know the ensign whose mom may be a dragon rider, right?
Yeah.
All those characters that I think live in the Temeraire books, are all potential people that somebody could play, or play that kind of character. And I really love the fact about this game that I feel like that's what it opens the doors to. And it's not that that's incompatible with wargaming, but it's just two different kinds of scales, right? If you're playing a game, I think most traditional wargaming, right? You know, you've got two people and each of you has an army, or you have teams, right? And each of you has an army. But you can't really be the individual characters. You're not embodying the individual characters there, in the way that I feel like your game is doing, and that really excites me. So
Yeah.
that's why, that I would say that's my answer for why.
I mean, there's also a thing here where if you're looking for high quality wargaming or miniatures gaming, it's not Magpie could absolutely put together something, but there's a lot of people doing really great work in that space. And what we want to do is do great work in our space, right? And so when we think about like what do you want, I'm struck by we did the ball first, right? And in the quick start, there's a ball, and you
Yeah,
get to gossip and kind of manipulate your position in the ball. And immediately we were like, okay, but like then what do the dragons do? And the cool thing about sort of cinematic or narrative gaming like this is it's like cutting back and forth on the camera, right? We cut to the ball, we see what Lawrence is doing in the ball, and then we cut to Temeraire. And so Brendan wrote this incredible dragon feast conflict
yeah,
where the dragons are all arguing over who gets to eat and what their reputations are. And so we get into the weeds with this, like how does it work? What are the incentives? But the core idea of it is cutting back and forth between the humans doing their human thing and the dragons doing their dragon thing. And then when we get in a fight, then they're doing it together. Right. Like that,
right,
that, that, like each of those different arenas is a place where the camera can kind of linger and take something in and then move on to the next conflict the next moment. And wargaming is not about that. Wargaming is about the specifics and the resources, and the drama comes from the die rolls when you know this is it, this is your last stand, right? And
Right.
not from a particular individual character having an emotion in that moment.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I really love, that this game is so versatile in such things. And yeah, when I read the series, it was more about the interplay with the relationships, the duties and desires, and such that are in this game also. A couple of questions that are related to that, like, yeah, we had the beautiful, like, Dragon's Feast, and then we had the ball. So will there be other social mechanics that will be along, like a social ball? What we have to do there is really interesting because you're interacting, but also dinners were extremely important in Regency. And like, so will there be like a mechanical scene for like how to navigate a political dinner, for example, or other things like that?
Sure. I mean, one of the joys of the Adonis system, and what we've been working on now for a number of years to bring it to gamers, is that you can always resolve everything with a simple die roll. So there's always the chance, if you say, okay, you are going to try to convince the head of this unit to join you in this sort of expeditionary force against his orders, but in the spirit of the war, and you're going to make this roll. And it's going to be an etiquette role, because this is all about whether you can navigate the dinner and get this across without embarrassing anybody, right? And we talked before about how etiquette in this game is not a standard etiquette, but your ability to manage many etiquettes, to pick up on the moment, right? And so you make that one roll and we're done, and that's it. Or we can look at conflicts that dramatize that and deepen it and give you more deeper moments for that thing. So if we're doing a Dragon's Feast and you just want to have a quick roll because it's the end of the session and we don't have time to do a whole conflict, you can do that roll and be done, or you can invest in this. And so we see the conflict system as kind of a modular piece. It allows us to focus the camera, to use that metaphor, and lengthen the scene in an appropriate and interesting way. And part of that is that hopefully everybody at the table is like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I want to see the ball. Like, we came all the way here to Italy. I want to see the ball. And if we're ever at a time where the players are like, another ball, like, I don't want to do another ball, then we're like, cool, roll the dice and move on, right? And so you, as the GM, you're the one with your thumb on the scale. You're the one making the decision about what parts of this story are interesting to see or not see. And so there will definitely be more conflict mechanisms. I think you're going to see that Adana as an engine has a library of those conflict mechanisms, even ones that you could adapt from other games. If you like the investigation conflict in Fallen London, you could bring it over to Temeraire. Temeraire doesn't have as many investigations, so it's probably not a core thing, but we want to make these tools that you can use to kind of fit your game and do the thing you want to do. And I think we don't want to tell you, well, sorry, anytime you attend a ball, that's a 2 hour conflict. You got to do the whole thing. It's not up to you. So there's going to be lots of new social conflicts, not just in Temeraire, but in other spaces. And within our supplements, that also gives us a space to, say, create a special Chinese focused conflict, like a courtly conflict that involves dragons and humans in a different way, because dragons have a different role in China. So that also gives us some flexibility and specifics that we think is really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's two parties I want to go with this, but I'll go a little bit more like, Mark, I'm having you talk a lot, but the Adonis system. So as we know, Fallen London was the first one to premiere the Adonis system, and now Temeraire. Why did you choose the Adonis system for Temeraire, compared to like using PBTA as y'all had used in the
Sure.
past and such?
Yeah, we've done a lot of Fate development. We've done a lot of PBTA development, and I think one of the things you learn from doing development in sort of open source systems is that even open source systems have limits. There's things that are really well done by that system, and the things that are not as well done. And one of the things that PBTA does really well is chaos. So there's a reason that the teenage superheroes and Mexican drug cartels and haunted houses all work well with Powered by the Apocalypse, and that's because every single moment is a chaotic twist, right? There's always that chance that everything is different because one thing happens. And what that doesn't do, I think, as well, is tell stories, namely like Temeraire, where Lawrence does not live in a world in which any moment he could be thrown out of the military, or this moment he has with the egg, for example. It's like this slow moving car crash where he can't seem to get away from this destiny, right? And so we think about it as a high context space. To understand Temeraire, the world, is to have, at least in the case of Temeraire, the book, you had to have a viewpoint character to explain it all. Otherwise, if it was just a guy who was riding his dragon that he's been groomed to ride since birth, he wouldn't even think about the Arrow Core as being unique or different, right? So I'm thinking here that, like, to some degree, the best understanding of why we're using the Adonis system is that your world requires there to be solidity, right? Like a sense of the aerial core being a actual institution that does not change overnight, but that actually takes a long time to change. And so the
Yeah.
Adana engine prioritizes a lot of things like your background and what you're able to do in terms of skills and what you're able to do in terms of these conflicts. And I'm curious, Naomi, when you started writing Temeraire, I know Master and Commander was like a big part of your thinking, but did you kind of understand from minute one that that was going to be a very solid world, to use that kind of metaphor?
So obviously, one of the things, of course, is that it's a very ordered society.
Right.
It's a sort of fairly rigid society, and that's part of that's part of the central sort of pressure and conflict in the Temeraire books, right? This sense in which you are constrained by the society. And that's true not even just in the West. They're different, and in fact, being caught between warring expectations of different societies is a recurrent theme in the books. And I feel that that's often a really satisfying place to play characters against that kind of world. The world is, and it also lets you, I think, lends itself to, and which I think the system that you've defined is really great for this, the sense of like almost a long-term plan, right? That even if you, the players, are going to play a short campaign, you feel like your characters have some kind of plan, right? They have some kind of sense of what's happening in their world, and they have careers, they have a
Yes.
war that's going on,
Yes.
they have their own advancement to think about. Um, they have all these, and because they're operating in this sort of formation structure, right? That is itself part of an institution that can almost literally physically move them around. Yeah, I feel like it invites you as the character to sort of engage with the world, and feel like both the world sort of trying to push you to do things, and I think that that duties and desires mechanism, right? The duties are so strong, and so critical, right? That it then creates, but that's what you need in
Yeah.
order to be able to play your desires, right?
Well, there's this
Yeah,
irony, I think, of like the reason Regency fiction keeps coming back and seems still relevant today is in part that we know that we're sort of bound even in the modern era by all these obligations and webs and families and things. But it's hard to see them because you live inside them. So when you look at like look at Bridgerton, right? And you're like, oh, but I know these rules. Like these rules are obvious. This is a period piece. I can see the rules of this society. And I'm laughing a little bit because I watched Bridget Jones' Diary for the first time in probably a decade, which I saw in the like late 90s when it came out. I was in my high school or something, and it's I'm so old that it reads to me like a period piece, if that makes sense. It's a period piece about the 90s based on Regency drama, right? And I think
right,
the movie honestly works better today because it's this look at the 90s as a particular social moment with particular social constraints, right? And so
right.
I think we love these things because they speak to us, and being able to see them clearly makes them more fun, right? So we know that there's a way the aerial core does things, and when Lawrence gets it wrong, and in the context of the game, he'd have to mark scandal. He'd embarrass himself, right?
Right.
We feel that come. It's not all at once, but like eventually, it's gonna come crashing down on you, man, if you cannot get yourself in line. And that sense that you can't escape, but it's not it's going to come, right? That the consequences are down the river. They're coming this way. I think that's an important part of dealing with, like you said, a rigid, ordered society where
Right.
saying the
And
wrong thing,
so right. And so when Lawrence offends people at the aerial core,
right,
that potentially has serious consequences for him in terms of like how good a first officer can he get? Right.
right,
How
yeah,
good and that itself, that has what kind of relationship can he have and how can he rescue that situation? You know, and and that's so there's real stakes for your character when you mess up on sort of like the social level, and that those stakes can affect what happens in literally in combat, right? Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great way of thinking about it is that scandal mounts and then your first officer quits and then you're spending this session trying to get them to come back because you can't find another one and you need them for this mission and then when you have that moment where they rejoin you and then you soar off into the battle, right? There's this sense of like you did that. That's not just some twist of the dice. Like the consequences came and then you dealt with them and it's real. And it's sort of funny because nothing in role playing games is real. Like it's all made up, but it has this weight to it that we're really excited about. And I say that like, I think some people have been like mad at me or something about saying some systems don't do everything, guys. It seems like a very non-controversial statement, but part of it is I don't want that solidity in cartel. I don't
Right.
want you to feel like, well, I'm a pretty good cartel member, and I think that my 401k should like I think I've done good work for El Narco, and I think that I have a good performance review. Like I want you in every conversation to be like, this guy could just shoot me right here, right on the spot,
Right.
right? And that's like those are two very different kinds of stories, right? That like when you're looking at something like Battlestar Galactica, we need to feel like the Cylons are coming, that the military matters, that Adana's relationships matter, but also when you look at something like Narcos, it's like whatever happens today. This
Right.
is just bonkers.
Right.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's one of the appeals I've had for Magpie is that like for each game it's a very centralized storytelling you're doing. Yeah, you can kind of hack it a little bit to like slightly like I know with Cartel, I believe it's with Cartel that you're doing the Berlin,
Yeah,
not, and I'm like I would have never have thought Berlin for Cartel, but then reading it I was like, oh, this makes sense. So with I think a big difference with this game compared to all the previous ones, it is insular. It is about starting off the British society and like the naval thing, and regular society and the aerial society. But it slowly grows bigger because the backdrop is technically a world like war going on, and this I believe this game is the first one where it's an entire world that we're going to be touching on. Like with Avatar, it was just the Avatar world. With Fallen London, obviously we're just stuck in the Neath kind of thing. But here we don't have to be stuck in just Britain and France and Italy. You've teased with the supplementary book of like going to the Americas. Like the book series teased us a little bit with going to the Americas and everything. So it's a two-part question because of like what are you excited for to get more time in outside of the source material for that? And are you going to be helping? Because you have had great, like the cartel introduction of getting into Mexico. Like this is how Mexico is supposed to feel like. How are you going to do that with all the other cultures that could happen for people who definitely don't know 1800s worldview or only know British worldview because that's pretty popular, Regency, Bridgerton, all of that. But when we want to play in China or we want to play in Latin America, it's like, will you be offering anything like that?
I mean, this is why from minute one, we there's some fundamental decisions you make when you start fleshing out a role-playing game. And one of the first one to me was just who do you get to play in the core book? And I think we
Right.
framed it like that from minute one because we always knew that we wanted you to have the option of doing really different things, whatever players kind of wanted to pursue. But we knew that there had to be some sort of baseline. Like there's got
Yeah.
to be some sense of like which countries are we going to delve in depth with, right? And so seeing China, seeing France, seeing England as being the three sort of major powers in your world, those felt to us to be like, cool, this is the sort of baseline of stuff we're going to see all the time. And then the supplement, the World of Wings supplement, really gives us the option of delving into each of those spaces enough to give GMs what they need to do. I think there's been a big push away in the last 20 years from the 300 pages on dragons in Italy that never makes it to the table and you never actually use. We want it to be something that's quick and easy to read and easy to implement, but deep enough that you have real plot hooks and real opportunities. But I think, as you can see, even in the quick start, we're excited about those things that don't fit. And I think, Naomi, fans were very surprised to hear about these mercenary dragons
Yeah.
in when we did the quick start. And I'm curious, as you get a chance to kind of flesh out some things and do some different things, um, like, where did that come from in terms of like getting a chance to do something different? Did you always have them in mind, and they were an easy fit, or like what made that seem right to you?
For me, I feel like, well, in terms of sort of Temeraire, the universe of Temeraire, right? Going to different societies. Um, I generally, the first question that I had basically always asked myself, and I share this for anybody, and sorry, to take one step back, actually, one of the things I really like about how you guys are approaching it is, I do think, like, the 300-page supplement for one particular nation is not as valuable as, like, getting in a few examples, right?
Right.
Because once, as a GM, once you have like the handful of examples seeing how different nations are represented, how dragon characters and human characters from different nations are represented, that is what gives you the pattern to enter in and think about. All right, so what are the dragons going to be like for this place that I and my players want to play in? And for me, similarly, when I was essentially, the first question that I always asked myself when I entered a new region with the characters was, what's the relationship in this society between humans and dragons? Right? That was my simple rule. That was the first question that I had to answer, and I had to answer it based on historical fact about that society. So, for instance, with the Tswana in Africa, one of the things that came up in my research was that ancestor worship was an extremely, at the time, historically, was an extremely common thread, and that, which is not uncommon at all worldwide, but was really quite central to that culture. And I thought, right. So how imagine if, you have these magical things around, right? Where if you get this dragon egg and you talk to it, and you live with it in your community, when it hatches, it becomes a part of your community. It's absorbed this message, and
Yeah.
and has actually, like, taken on this idea, and then that gives your community massive advantages, right? In a very practical sense. Because societies tend to do things that serve them, right? Not necessarily in, like, on for individuals, but right, if a society is going to be successful in terms of, in a sort of like against its neighbors, they're going to do things, right, that allow them to survive in that way. And that so for instance, that was one example. In With the Inca, right? I've established by the point that we get there, right, that dragons are slightly hoarding creatures by nature, right? And so you think, what do they value in each society? And obviously, we have the historical record that the epidemics had decimated, native communities in South America, and that even if a society with dragons in it was able to resist conquest, that still meant their society would still be sort of suffering upheaval on a great scale. And I thought, right, they would start to value people. And what would that mean, right? If now you've got a society where the dragons are like hoarding the people, and the people are sort of like trying, almost in a sense, to escape their smothering dragon um, you know, parents. And that approach, I think, made each society feel distinct and different, and created opportunities for conflict when you have Lawrence and Temeraire with their own expectations and their own sort of idea of like how things are, how things should be, meeting another society that in some ways is just as rigid in terms of thinking about how things should be. Yeah, so I feel like that was my own key place, and sort of trying to grow everything, all my own rules of a society from that one core mechanic in a way.
Well, there's an interesting kind of rule there we talked about before when we did a panel around the difference between historical fantasy and just fantasy, right? Because you've also
Right.
written just fantasy books, right?
Yeah.
Is that the historical part really matters? Surprise! Like the historic. So it's sort of like how do we keep it grounded enough in the real world that the feeling is still there. So if we said, "Oh yeah, it's the Napoleonic Wars, but Napoleon's dead, and there's this totally different woman, and she has nothing to do with anything, and she has totally different goals," you'd be like, "Cool. What does this have to do with the Napoleonic Wars? He's not even around, right?" So you have to have these sort of anchor points that then broaden and expand. And so thinking through like a lot of what we want to do with the World of Wings is give you a frame that allows you to take what happened in the real world and bring it into your game in an interesting way. Because I think the other thing you're doing, Naomi, maybe without even realizing it, is you're not choosing the most boring answer of, "Oh
Oh,
yeah,
well,
these people all died of plague, and there's just that kind of nobody here." Right. And you're
right.
like, well, that's a little creepy and sort of white settlery, and then B is just not very interesting. So we want to give you an interesting lens to bring these characters in to the story. If your characters go there, go to that part of the world, we want there to be interesting things for you to do. And that's kind of our promise always is that
Right.
if there's a skill, it's an interesting skill. If there's a conflict, it's an interesting conflict. And if there's a part of the setting that we're going to help you explore, then we're going to find what's interesting about that setting. And luckily, the time period you picked, Naomi, has a lot going on for,
Yeah.
for everybody.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things, thinking about talking about order and slightly rigid societies, right? One of the things is, of course, this is an era that is just starting for people really traveling long distances, and certainly not the majority of people, right? Most people don't move any great distance in their lives in this era, um, and uh, and so, in a way, that sort of makes societies have more clearly defined boundaries,
Mm.
that allows you to make them, plausibly very distinct from one another.
It's a really interesting question, right? Around how well, because this is the challenge, I think, for all role playing games, is how well can we get you to be a character in that setting, right? So
Right.
for me, I mean, obviously, I don't think of, Central America as being close necessarily, but I don't think of it as being that far. Like I could hop on a plane and go tomorrow, right? So part of it is this kind of thing of the travel log of the original books is fun
Yeah.
because Lawrence is growing. He grew up in this space that's very limited, but he doesn't see it as limited. It's his whole world, so he doesn't necessarily see that.
Yeah.
And then as he goes, he sees this incredible diversity in the world that challenges him. And so for us, I think one of our challenges is to work in that diversity in a way that feels genuine to the players, so that they. And this
Yeah.
goes, I think, back to duties and desires, right? Which is that if you have a duty to the British Crown and you feel that it is vital that you steal this dragon egg, but then you see that the dragon egg is like supporting this entire community, and then you're forced to contend with the fact that the other community has a radically different view of what dragons are and how they work. That does get you a little bit to that sense of, okay,
Yeah.
are you going to follow through on your duty, or are you going to follow through on your desire to see people be free, which is the whole reason you're fighting Napoleon, right? Like
Right.
that conflict is sort of written into the mechanics in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really do love that. And as was mentioned before, you have to have a starting scope and everything. So, and I do appreciate, and I know that I'm obviously very excited for the supplementary book to getting that all information. Um, but we had a couple of questions, and I know you've seen in the comments before. What was the reasoning for people who don't understand the business and everything for having the Russians, the Prussians as stretch goals? Like, why aren't they inherent in the book? Because that they are a little bit more central than, say, give me a Central American dragon right now, please, kind of thing. Like,
Sure.
and that such. And for people who want, related to this, for people who want like stats or for every single dragon type, or like, are you going to have advice for the fact that you're probably not going to be doing that?
I mean, we're going to stat up as many dragons as we can. I mean, they're like, I mean, I think people have seen that chart that Marissa made of all
Yeah.
the different dragons, which is so cool to
So gorgeous.
see them all in one place and their different body types and everything. I mean, the first thing is that we are big fans of empowering players and GMs to do their own thing, right? I think one of the reasons we immediately were drawn to you, Naomi, is when we talk about players creating their own dragons, you're like, yeah, make your own dragons. That sounds fun, right? Do your thing. There are
Yeah.
definitely some spaces where we have with some licenses that would be less than thrilled to encourage players to make their own dragon, which seems
Yeah,
silly because they're going
no,
to make
no. Make your own dragon species, make your own,
yeah,
entire dragon human societies,
right,
that's one of the magic things
yeah,
about having this canvas that is not so, because people don't travel everywhere and people don't know a lot about what goes on in their societies. It gives you as the GM, as the players, so much scope to create new things.
absolutely.
In different parts of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, and so part of that is also a question about what is going to take the most work from us, right? What are we going to have to spend, and what is Naomi going to have to spend time doing? And so when we identified, like you said, okay, we've got these sort of three core societies that are really central to the world. We have in World of Wings a lot of work that Naomi's already done to figure these pieces out. The Russian and Prussian dragons and humans seemed like a really good place for us to say, okay, if we get here, this is going to be a cool addition to the game, but that's a part of the game that needs a decent amount of work to flesh out. And if I'm not mistaken, Naomi, a lot of the discussions you've had with Marissa are, wait, what are these kinds of dragons called? Like where would they be? Right? Because we're having the joy slash terror of a role playing game is you have to write things down. It's not just
Right.
one dragon that looks cool. Now we have to say, okay, but it's this is what they're called, right?
Right.
And so part of the stretch goals often reflect for us the work we've already committed to do is like, okay, World of Wings, we've committed to do all the stuff that we see in the world that Lawrence and Temeraire interact with in this space. And so the stretch goal reflects, well, we're excited to do this work. If we have enough people and enough excitement about it, we'll add that to the pool. And I think people were a little confused about like having dragon stretch goals and human stretch goals. So we said, okay, cool, no problem. Let's put those together because they are one kind of thing, right? They are sort of
Yeah.
intermixed with each other, and so it made sense to us when people brought it up that like, yeah, we'll just do one, and that gave us some room to do a new, some new stretch goals. So I'm excited to see those come together as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I do feel like the having the Prussians and the Russians are quite useful, in particular for people who are really interested in the core Napoleonic Wars. Having those characters, having that fleshed out, because look, there are different kinds of players and GMs, all the ways, right?
Right.
There are people who are very happy being like, right, I'm rolling up my sleeves, I'm making my completely new, Guatemalan dragons, right? And there's an empire hidden in the Yucatan, and uh, and you but then there are also players who are like, well, I don't want to have to make everything up. I'm more interested in our like individual characters and in this core setting of the Napoleonic Wars. And I kind of like you to kind of give me all the pieces so I don't have to spend that time building that. I can just jump right in. And I feel like that's what once you have the British, the French, the Prussians, and the Russians all on the board, that gets so much of the players in so many of the Napoleonic War battles that for which you can find historical material, right? And I think that really that serves both kinds of players because having those different examples, right? Like, so here are dragons of the West, but here's how they differ from one society to the next, right? And yeah, I feel like that's kind of and obviously that does become a bit more canonical, right?
Yeah.
So and so I feel like that works pretty well in terms of, you guys don't have to worry too much. Like, there is stuff about the Prussian and the Russian dragons in there, and they are sort of connected directly to the societies that we see a lot of. So it's not quite as, jumping off without a net, kind of thing. I feel like.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned in the previous live stream that you want people to write stuff for you, essentially,
Yeah.
to like have their own ideas. As we mentioned in the previous one, there is no current plans to like set Temeraire in other time periods. It's roughly going to be around the time periods of the books and everything.
I mean, we have some differences there. Like there is a difference. And we talked about this, Naomi, I think, in our first or second meeting, that if you start before the Temeraire book series, the war is in full. There's wars, there's drama, there's all this stuff to do, but Temeraire isn't hatched yet, and so some of what happens in the future hasn't happened yet. And if you start after the book series, well, dragons have a very different relationship to humans in some
Yeah.
parts of the world after the book series ends. So there is a little bit of a decision you're going to have to make about where to set that. Is it contemporary to the books, previous to the books, after the books? But that's up to you and your table to figure out which of those relationships are you the most excited about.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is part of what makes that setting also really fun, that you have those different, you can sort of twist the dial in terms of what you're interested in playing.
There was a player that asked that in this, because I haven't unfortunately not finished the entire series. I'm one of those people who like get to the last couple of books and I'm like, but if I read them, then it's done, or shows and such. But someone was
Yeah.
had mentioned that like in one of the books there was like a Chinese lore about someone transforming into a dragon, and so they're wondering, is that going to be a possibility? Like, how fantastical are we going in the
Oh,
RPG compared to what you did in the books? Like, will there be any mechanical, I guess, opportunities for someone to transform?
I mean, I feel like I fully 100% endorse any GM who wants to come up with that mechanic and let their players start, maybe they could just have like a feast where somebody slips some mushrooms into both the dragons and the humans' meals, and they all have a very elaborate dream sequence where they've all switched bodies or something. And, but I feel like that would be super fun. I encourage GMs to do that. I feel like that's sort of not what the Temeraire universe itself is about,
Right.
you know. But at the same time, I feel like it does feel to me like a fairy tale that gets told in the Temeraire universe. But maybe what you can do is your characters in Temeraire could sit around and play a tabletop role playing game in which they are.
There's a great comic that goes around sometimes of a bunch of dragons playing laundry and taxes or something, the role
Right.
playing game, right?
Yes,
Like that
that's
kind of
great.
thing. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that you nailed it, right? You said two things that I think if you ever would like to be in the tabletop RPG game designer community, I think, Naomi, you'd be very welcome, because these are two things that I think you learn in really hard ways as you go through. The first one is, it is our job to make it playable. It's not our job to have ideas. Like, ideas are great. Ideas are really cool. The joy of tabletop role playing games is when I can deliver that idea to your table in a meaningful way that will produce actual play. It means that like a lot of our work goes into saying, yeah, Dragon Feast would be cool. And then we meet, but how would it work? How could
Right.
we get the incentives of the feast to match the incentives of the players? How can we leave that scene with exciting things? How can we do things that are coming from outside? Meaning, if you're a big dragon, how can that matter? If you're a brave dragon, you have a reputation, how would that matter? And so figuring out how all those inputs and outputs work, that's actually the job of a tabletop RPG designer. And then secondly, as you just said, what is the core thing about? Right. So, like, one of the big decisions that we always face in the setting we make is, what's the role of magic? Is there magic? If there is magic, where does it live? And what's real, I actually have a question here that I was thinking on my way back from lunch, which is, do you think of the dragons in Temeraire as magic? Or do you think of them as sort of supernatural be, extra natural beasts? Like when you're writing, do you think of them as fundamentally magical creatures, or do you feel that they're real in a way that's sort of different to you? Because I think that's sort of a little bit what we're getting at here is how does
Yeah.
that part work?
Yeah, no, I absolutely, obviously, look, you have to hand wave quite a bunch of physics when you're
Right.
making dragons, especially because I'm sorry, I know it doesn't make sense, but I like the four-limbed dragons with wings. I don't care.
Four limbs
I
and
don't
wings.
care. Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
so you do have to and feeding all the dragons of the world
right.
would probably take a few more cows than there are
Then there
actually.
are cows. Yeah.
Yeah, the magical cows. But like I feel like that's the piece that I'm asking you to sort of not pay attention to.
Right.
I'm like,
Right.
don't look at that. Don't think about that too much,
Right. Yeah.
right? You can still imagine constraints of supply. You can still imagine constraints of some amount of physics, right? So, for instance, when I was trying to think about the speed the dragons could fly at, I did some research into what they think, based on mechanics, bodies pteranodons could do,
Right.
right? I looked for scale and weight. I looked at tyrannosaurs, right? To some extent, I was trying to I was trying to find ways to ground the dragons into our actual historical physical world,
Right.
right? So I do think of the dragons in Temeraire. I want you to believe, right, that it's, as a reader, right? I'm saying believe that these dragons actually exist, really are physical creatures in the world. They're not supernatural, they're not magic. There is actually some scientific explanation, some real biological, biochemical explanation for why they can breathe fire, or they can, fly, or, the divine wind. Yeah, okay. It doesn't actually make sense, but, it's like, shh, shh,
Roll
right?
with it. Roll with
Roll with it,
it.
right? But the thing is that because of that, uh, what I essentially what I think you're doing often as a writer, right, is when you bring a reader into a new world, when you're writing fantasy, where to me, right, the point of fantasy is essentially that, and I often like to say this, that all fiction is fantasy. It's
Right.
all made up. You can write a story that is absolutely accurate down to like the minute that appears to be realistic, but it's still made up. It's still made up. And the thing about writing fantasy is essentially that you're saying, I, as the writer, am continue and taking control of the set. I, as the writer, am
Mm.
taking control of the entire way that the universe works, and I'm going to tailor it to tell you a story. And but that's, if you just sort of throw the reader into anything can happen, that's not really satisfying. That's a hard place to
Right.
experience a story. You were just talking about how you want to make the game playable. I want to make the universe believable. I want to make the universe something immersive. And I think you can't immerse yourself if you don't feel like the writer has, in a sense, kind of offered you a contract, right? This is the way this world works. And I'm not going to change this on you. When I tell you, like, this is how, so when I'm giving you dragons, I'm saying these are physical creatures. They're in the world, and yeah, but as long as you accept the dragons, right? They're going to get tired. They're going to need to get fed. They have limits on how much they can carry. And obviously, yeah, I might stretch a limit a little bit here and there to get a particular scene, especially, if I'm trying to hook it up to a historical event that I really want to have happen. But for the most part, I'm going to follow those rules, and so that you can trust that you understand how the world works. That's kind of
Right.
my feeling.
Right. Well, there's something really beautiful there, I think, about the way that contract is the basis of the fiction. right? Like, I think there's a kind of fiction, like you think about like fairy tales or fables, they don't really have that core thing, right? You say, okay, there's a fisherman and his wife, he goes out and catches a fish and the fish talks. We're not like, oh, hold the phone. Talking fish, what the hell just happened, right? We're like, cool. That's like, I'm on board, right? It's a fable. Like, things are going to be weird. Things are going to be different. The
Right.
grasshopper and the ant. I'm not like, but where are the ant's friends?
Right.
Why would the ant ever be alone? Right? Like, this feels like a betrayal of the story to ask those questions of a fable. And so when
Right.
we get to the sort of other end of the spectrum, it's the man, Lawrence is sad because his life is ruined by his super cool dragon friend. And you're like me as a reader, because I talked about this before, me as a reader, I'm like, you have a dragon, it's so cool. But then you have to be like, but I'm sorry about your whole social standing and your relationship and your parents, man. That's a bummer.
Right. Right.
And so, like, for it to be real, it has to be rooted in those promises. And I think fables do that too, but I think it's so explicit. And with role-playing games, there's this thing that emerges at the table. You have this magic circle where everybody is bought into the events, the challenges, the conflicts at the table. And if we say, yeah, like, what's good, you're being court-martialed for your activities last session. If we walk into the court-martial and it's, surprise, it's a birthday party. You're like, but I invested a lot of emotional energy into thinking about this court martial.
Right.
And it's a promise, right? And those promises, I think, are what drives fiction. Promises are what drives, I think, successful role playing games, that there's going to be a there in the
Yeah.
middle of it, right? And so it's interesting because I think there's a way of thinking of dragons as magic, like thinking about other things with dragons. Game of Thrones, the dragons are physical, right? But there's a lot of magic stuff that happens around
Right.
them, and the way they bring magic back to the world, and how
Right.
they grow and their relationship with Danny. And it has this very metaphorical, fuzzy, dreamy kind of thing. But there's only
Right.
the three, right? There's only the
Right.
three. They're special. And in Temeraire, there's a sense that I could see a dragon land outside my window and be like, whoa, it's big.
Like in Diana's
Like,
background.
yeah, right, right. Be like, that's a large beast, sir, and
Right.
not be like freaked out in the sense of it being magical, but being like, I think of it as the majesty of an elephant. Like, if you've ever stood next
Right.
to an elephant, you're like,
Right.
how is this thing real? It's
Right.
so big, and then
Right.
that 5 or 6 or 10 times bigger, right? And so
Right.
I think
I
that's an
think of
interesting
those,
way to.
those cruise ships that come in sometimes into a city.
Yeah,
It's like sometimes you see them and I live in New York, and so you go down the West Side Highway, and suddenly there's like an extra office building just hanging out there in the harbor. And in a way, I feel like, obviously just scaled, right? So you live in New York City, you're used to big buildings, but all of a sudden it's like, womp, this thing that's just moving. And I feel like, yeah, that's sort of that similar, and when the world follows rules, you can, as a player, get into that mindset, right? I feel like that's a thing you can think of and believe.
yeah, exactly.
I love it. Yes. With we're gonna go 15 minutes more, so I'm gonna do a couple of like easier, more fun questions. Naomi, what part of this process has been fun for you to jump back into? Because you are presumably writing at least a little bit more new lore for Mark and them to work on. What has been like really exciting you getting back into the Temeraire world?
I mean, it's been really fun. So here's the thing: I love the art so much. For me, I'm just like, I will never get tired of seeing art made for my
Right,
universe. Like, I remember that picture, like, right behind you, Diana. That when I first saw that, I was just like, it's everything I dreamed of. And I feel like I really enjoyed some of those questions about some of the different kinds of dragon breeds, right? To flush out the Prussian and the Russian dragons. Um, you know, Thinking about, because one of the things is, as a writer, there's so much more in my head than ever makes it on the page. And so I know things about the dragon breeds of Prussia that are not in any of the canon. Um, and uh, and so I can say, oh, actually, that's not what the dragons of Prussia are like. Because, and it's right. Um, where Which isn't to say, not in a sort of like rigid way. It's just more like those are things that I haven't thought about, but somehow still am carrying around in my brain. And that's been fun to sort of come back to some of those things and think about them, and yeah.
I mean, Marissa does it so effortlessly to bring things to life. I think she sometimes doesn't
Yeah.
appreciate it because like the image that we have one of the images is these two people fighting on a dragon while another
Yes.
dragon is coming towards them, and it just has this like this energy to it that's like, yes, that's what I want.
Yeah.
I want to be a French captain fighting to keep control of my dragon while another dragon swoops in on us. Like the scale of it is so exciting, and it feels so real, even though it's just like a picture, right?
Yes.
And that's being drawn from, I think, all of the work that you've done to give that. That's the promise of the world means you can make it real. You can't make a world real if it doesn't have a center. Does that make sense? Like the
Yeah.
reason that Star Wars imagery is so captivating is because there was so much work put into making it feel real for so long that now it just seems like a real place that you could go visit. Or I guess if you go to Disneyland, you can
Yeah.
visit it, right? Like you can step into it. But yeah, like there's something really neat about seeing it brought to life in many different ways. And the image you have as your background, Diana, is one of the ones we wanted to show. The dragons also, just hang out and like
Yeah.
talk to people.
And meddle and matchmake
Yeah,
because
well, yeah,
my
yeah,
personal
right.
desire is to have some matchmaking meddling dragons, and I know some other
Yeah,
people have commented about having doctor dragons or like
yeah,
doing
Yeah.
yeah,
non-combaty things, which as
Yeah.
Naomi mentioned in the previous live, I was about to say live journal. That's how old I am. Live stream. Uh,
Yay, live
like
journal.
yeah, we could have that. We could have a quartermaster dragon and everything. But related to the art, someone there was a couple of people asking, will there be any more like artists named or like any like surprise artists as they say for the book, or is the ones that are mentioned in the quick start credited are the core team of the artists?
I mean, we work very much on a art pack by art pack basis. So we generally, unless there's a special case, we work with who's available, who meets the style, and who we've worked with before as often as we can, right? So we have some people we've worked with repeatedly that are going to be joining us for this. We have some that are brand new, but we just love their dragons, right? One of the best parts of Marissa's job is she gets to go look at 5,000 dragon portfolios and say, I like your dragons. There are very rarely times where we work specifically with just one artist. I'm thinking about Rapscallion being the biggest. The writer, designer, and illustrator for Rapscallion is the same person, which I still think is really
So
unfair to the
talented.
rest of us who
Yeah.
only have one talent. It does not seem fair. But Whistler's incredible, and their art is so cool. And so that's a case where we work with just one person. Every other thing we do, I would love to just tell an artist, well, we just want you to work just for us, but they have very busy schedules, and so it's a lot more almost like making a class schedule. Who can you fit in where? What can we do first? What can we do later? There's a lot of behind the scenes work that happens with a book like this because it's not just the text. It's like I say often to people who don't know what role playing games are that I make textbooks more or less. That there's got
Right.
to be some graphics, there's got to be some art, there's got to be some problems, there's got to be some writing, and it's all got to hang together and feel like one cohesive thing. But it's also 300 pages. And so a lot of what we're working on is figuring out who's available and what are they available for, and what are they available in our other projects as well, because Marissa's also art directing, sort of air traffic controlling all the other things we're working on too.
Awesome. So duties and desires is a fun mechanic that's in here and everything. Someone did ask, and I am curious, what are your favorite like duties and desires that you have like, for both of you, come up with or want to play with, in a future Temeraire campaign?
Mm. I mean, I like to GM, so I would be more interested in like what would the players want? I feel like with dragons, I would be interested to see people try come up with some sort of unusual desires, like a dragon that maybe kind of got hooked on something that's not sort of a classic thing to hoard, but that actually, you know what? I remember this tiny little book that I read as a kid called A Book Dragon, right? A dragon that like latches onto books as the greatest treasures, you know. And Temeraire is pretty into books, but sort of more like books as almost
Yeah,
objects,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Like
Like
rare books, right? Like a
yes,
first edition, right? Like kind of being, yes, that would be great.
right, and would be like collecting them and hoarding them, and be extremely upset if any of their precious books got damaged. And you know, I feel like some interesting, the thing about that is, you know, if you're playing a dragon and you have a desire like that, I feel like you have to really kind of go all in, like be the most obsessed like collector that there is, you know, and have that really kind of driving your character. And I think that could be quite interesting to play with, partly because, you know, other dragons might be like, what's so great about a bunch of moldy paper, you know, right? It's like you can't eat it,
Well,
right?
there's a thing that the duties and desires does, right, which is to make these internal character moments external, right? So it's I think it's common when you're playing like D&D or something to be like, oh, my character really cares about watches, and we're like, cool. So what does that look like? Well, I have like 10 watches on each arm, and you're like, okay, cool. And so like there's this thing where it becomes almost like a costume piece more than an actual
Right.
drive or conflict, right? And so what's so cool is to have the dragon be like, well, no, I don't just care about this. Like I'm willing to maybe alter one of the messages that we received in order to make sure we're a little closer to that place where I know that there's a first edition book that I'm interested in. And if I get caught, well, you know, it is what it is. But like it actually can drive play in a very
Yeah.
direct way, right? And yeah, so for me, I always joke that what I want in a game is I want to be able to get divorced in the game and have it matter, right?
Right.
Which is to say that like very few role-playing games really manage kind of what I think of as like older, mature adult relationships. It doesn't know what to do with being a parent. It doesn't know what to do with losing a loved one, right? So I think having something like a desire that's based in grief or something to honor my dead brother, right? To have that kind of thing where it's like it's not a desire like a passion that I just can't live without. It's a kind of like way that I've settled myself with something that's
Mm,
happened in the past. And so my character's backstory is coming in that way. And you could do it as a duty. I have a duty to keep my brother's honor and restore his name because he was falsely accused of something, or I have a desire, which is to make myself feel okay with his loss, right? That those are two really different ways of approaching the same thing. And
right.
what's fun is by deciding, is this a duty? Is this something you have to do that like maybe you don't even want to do it, but you feel like you're obligated to do it? Or is this something that's driving you as a desire that you will give up other things to get it done? Just that simple choice says so much about what those beliefs are, right? Do
Yeah.
I have an obligation to protect every rare book from these stupid humans who burn them and lose them? And or do I have a desire to hold in my grubby little claws the perfect first edition of this particular book, right? Those are two
Right.
very different feelings as you get into what that system does.
Yeah, I'm personally excited to explore that as the other games I play. I like those. I like internal character motivations and reasonings. That's the kind of RP I enjoy. I'm not much of a battle person. I mean, they can be fun. Sometimes it's fun to have the cool gun or like, you know, the cool weapon and go wow. But that's like 10 minutes of like a 4-hour session that I'm interested in, you know. And I appreciate that with Temera, as you've mentioned before, with the Adonis system, it's modular, so we could have half a session being the battle plan, being like all that, or we can just rack it up and go to that dance that we were looking forward to, you know, or at least I was looking forward to. um Relatedly, a lot of people have a desire, and you've mentioned it, you're the perennial GM, Naomi. Would you ever be willing to do like an actual play for to GM this game one shot? You know, the fans want to see you.
Maybe. I mean, you know, I feel like you know, I do always want to play a game first as a
Yeah,
player.
yeah, of
I've
course.
been planning to I have actually, I do have plans to like get a bunch of people together to play some Temeraire at my place. But I feel like my family circle a little bit more than like on the internet.
On the
But yeah.
internet. Yeah.
So maybe Mark has to GM the first time.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it is funny. The actual play seems like, oh, you just get on and run a game, but it's getting on running a game, knowing everybody you've ever known is watching, right? Is a
Exactly.
different
Yeah.
different kind of magic circle. So, but yeah, no, I mean, we'd love to have you. I think it's something especially when the game is done,
Yeah.
doing things, having maybe some of your friends join us. Naomi seems a lot of fun, and
Would be
like getting
great.
to be in the world in that moment is super super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is nerve-wracking, but I do have fun GMing and playing on live streams. Um, so it's, yeah, obviously no pressure. Whatever you're
Yeah.
comfortable with, Naomi, but just know the fans would love to see you
I
like
will.
play.
I would definitely play. I would definitely play a session, and then we'll see. Maybe I'll.
Oh,
Yeah,
Maybe I'll GM.
awesome.
It'd be
Um,
fun.
a couple of quick, like more like common questions for Mark. Languages. People are clamoring to see this game in French and in Spanish. Are like the top ones. How does
yeah,
that
of
generally
course.
work? Because you know,
Yeah. I mean, so we have a lot of writing left to do, right? When we do these, we make sure that we know what we want. We have a lot of the writing done, but especially with stretch goals and other things, we're continually expanding that, editing it, getting in layout. There's a lot of writing to be done, and so we tend to wait to lock down licenses until we have a really good sense of what we're going to have for that licensor. So there's some like root stuff from 2021 that's coming out this last year, right? That could happen. It can take that long. But typically, what we want is for somebody from that region to do it. Like I want somebody not just that speaks Spanish, but we actually draw a line between North American Spanish or South American Spanish and European Spanish because there's a huge difference between what Spanish sounds like and looks like in Mexico versus Madrid. So we work with individual publishers depending on our relationships in that area and what the scope of the project is. So what's going to happen is when we kind of wrap up the Kickstarter, we have a good sense of what we're doing, and we get back to sort of starting to make these books a reality. Then we start talking with our licensing partners about what they're interested in and what they want to commit to do. But a translation is a lot of work. It's like writing the book all over again in a different language and somehow having to have it fit the same page count, which, as you know, we know, Diana, Spanish is not exactly the shortest language. And so our graphic designer, Miguel, who translates things into Spanish, often laments that he just has to add 3 or 4 extra pages just for the Spanish. I think that we're going to see that stuff come out slowly. But we know how important it is because, let's say, for example, in France, like if you want to play in France and you, the GM, speak English, that's great, but your players may not. Maybe not all your players do. And giving them the opportunity to play in their native language is super, super important. So everybody that we try to do as much as we can. And we actually have a big bookshelf in the office down the hall that has all the books we've ever gotten in different languages. I have a copy of the original Urban Shadows in Russian and Cyrillic. I have, many, many German copies of everything where the titles are 27 characters long. Like for us, having Temeraire books in French may be French and Chinese, I suppose, would be like the creme de la creme of seeing foreign translations. So they'll come. It just takes a long time to get through all the work. Right.
I was muted, so nobody heard that.
Oh,
What I was saying, obviously you guys have the captions, but yeah, it takes a long time to do translations. It can't never come out at the same time as the English ones. But we do appreciate. I know, we appreciate all the. We want Temeraire and all the Magpie. I know I do all over the
Yeah.
world to enjoy, and I'm sure Naomi gets happy when her books are translated into other languages because it's so
Yeah.
fun. It's so great. We are over time now. Thank you everybody in chat for showing up who had shown up. Thank you everybody who are going to watch in the VODs because you went out to celebrate St. Patty's Day possibly.
I'm wearing
Or
green.
yeah, or just work stuff. There is still time to back the Kickstarter. We're still a little bit over 7 days left. Do know that you can back it in payments is one of the Kickstarters that do offer that. That's how I'm paying for it, is in payments. So you pledge, you don't get charged until the Kickstarter ends, and then you can pay it in monthly payments or however the system will work for you. But we appreciate everyone. Thank you. Also, someone mentioned it's almost the 20-year anniversary since the first book was published. Like
Wow.
sometime
Yeah.
in March, like later this March.
I think it was. The first one was June
Oh,
June 2006.
yeah. So
That's not
Yeah.
20 years ago. That's like 5 years ago, Naomi.
Right?
I don't know why
Yeah.
you're so. What year is it? It can't be 2026. That's incorrect.
How did that happen?
Yeah, it's funny to watch 90s movies now and be like, that was
Right.
30 years. Oh my God, I'm so young.
Wow.
Naomi, thank you so much for coming on again. I
Yeah,
think
thank you.
No, thank you guys for having me, and thank you so much for doing this. I cannot wait
it's gonna
to
be
play and to run it.
it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. We'll see y'all soon. Thanks a ton.
Bye,
Yes.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.